Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the sterile hallway of Coronado Naval Base, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. At 52, she had been invisible to most people for the better part of 20 years. The Navy SEALs who passed by barely glanced at the short, stocky woman in the faded blue uniform. To them, she was just another face in the background, someone who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. But Maria had secrets that would shock every person on that base. 25 years ago, she had been Sergeant Maria Elena Santos of the Colombian National Army's elite counterterrorism unit. She had trained with the best snipers in South America, earned medals for marksmanship that gathered dust in a box under her bed, and fought battles that never made it into any history books. Those days felt like another lifetime now, buried beneath years of cleaning supplies and minimum wage paychecks. The transformation began when her husband Carlos was killed during a drug cartel raid in Medellin. Maria was 6 months pregnant at the time, carrying twins who would never meet their father. The grief nearly destroyed her, but it also opened her eyes to a harsh reality. Colombia was becoming too dangerous for her unborn children. She needed to get them somewhere safe, somewhere they could grow up without the constant threat of violence. Using her military connections, Maria applied for asylum in the United States. The process took 3 years of paperwork, interviews, and waiting. During that time, she gave birth to Isabella and Diego, raised them as a single mother, and watched the country she loved tear itself apart. When the approval finally came through, she packed everything that mattered into 2 suitcases and bought 3 one-way tickets to San Diego. Starting over in America proved harder than any military operation she had ever completed. Her Colombian military training meant nothing to American employers. Her English was broken and heavily accented. Her college degree in tactical operations was not recognized by any U.S. institution. She was a highly trained warrior reduced to cleaning office buildings and restaurants just to keep her children fed. The job at Coronado came through a temp agency 5 years ago. The pay was decent, the hours were steady, and most importantly, it came with health insurance for her and the twins. Maria took pride in her work, even if others looked down on it. She scrubbed floors with the same precision she once used to clean her sniper rifle. She organized supply closets with the tactical efficiency she once applied to mission planning. What the SEALs did not know was that Maria understood every word of their conversations. She had spent 3 years learning English by watching American movies and reading military manuals. Her accent made people assume she was ignorant, and she had learned to use that assumption to her advantage. While cleaning around their briefing rooms, she absorbed information about their training exercises, their equipment, and their operational procedures. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was one of the few who ever bothered to acknowledge her existence. He would nod politely when their paths crossed, and sometimes even say good morning in his limited Spanish. Maria appreciated the gesture, even though she spoke English better than he probably realized. Morrison commanded SEAL Team 7's Alpha Platoon, a group of 12 elite warriors who had seen action in Afghanistan, Iraq, and various classified locations around the globe. The platoon included Staff Sergeant Tommy Chun, a demolitions expert from San Francisco whose parents had immigrated from Taiwan. There was Petty Officer First Class Marcus Williams, a communications specialist from Detroit who could hack into enemy radio frequencies faster than most people could send a text message. Hospital Corpsman Second Class David Kumar served as their medic, a soft-spoken man from Chicago whose steady hands had saved more lives than he could count. Petty Officer Second Class Ryan O'Sullivan handled their heavy weapons, a redhead from Boston whose Irish temper was matched only by his loyalty to his teammates. Petty Officer Third Class Alex Rodriguez managed their reconnaissance equipment, using drones and surveillance gear to gather intelligence before operations. The youngest member was Seaman James Mitchell, just 22 years old, and eager to prove himself worthy of the SEAL trident he wore with such pride. These men represented the best of American military training, each one capable of operating in any environment on Earth. They could survive in Arctic conditions, navigate through dense jungles, and execute precision strikes in urban warfare scenarios. What they could not do was see the threat that was slowly building around their own base. Maria noticed the changes first because she was always watching, always listening. Strange maintenance workers appeared on the base, men who spoke with accents she recognized from her days fighting cartels in Colombia. They claimed to be contractors hired to upgrade the electrical systems, but Maria saw how they moved, how they positioned themselves, how they seemed more interested in mapping the base layout than actually fixing anything. The real contractors had been there the week before, legitimate electricians who completed their work efficiently and left. These new men were something else entirely. They carried tools, but Maria noticed that their hands were not calloused like those of real workers. Their uniforms were too clean, their movements too calculated. Most telling of all, they spoke to each other in rapid Spanish when they thought no one was listening, discussing things that had nothing to do with electrical work. Maria's military training kicked in as she observed their behavior patterns. They spent too much time near the SEAL team buildings, taking photographs of entrances and exit points while pretending to check junction boxes. They asked casual questions about security procedures, shift changes, and personnel movements. When the base's actual security team walked by, these men became nervous, fumbling with their equipment and avoiding eye contact. The pieces of a puzzle began forming in Maria's mind, a picture that filled her with growing dread. Someone was planning an attack on the base, specifically targeting the SEAL teams. The fake contractors were gathering intelligence, mapping out the facility, and identifying the best ways to infiltrate and strike. Maria had seen this pattern before in Colombia, where cartels would spend weeks studying military installations before launching coordinated assaults. She considered reporting her suspicions to base security, but knew how that conversation would go. A janitor with broken English claiming that maintenance workers were actually terrorists? They would think she was crazy, paranoid, or trying to cause trouble. Even if they listened politely, they would probably assume she was mistaken about what she had seen and heard. Maria decided to conduct her own surveillance operation instead. She used her access to different areas of the base to track the movements of the suspicious contractors. She memorized their faces, noted their vehicles, and documented their behavior patterns. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears and added details that made the threat even more serious than she had initially thought. The fake contractors were not working alone. They had accomplices among the base's support staff, people who had been slowly infiltrating Coronado over the past several months. A new food service worker who seemed more interested in the dining hall's proximity to the SEAL barracks than in actually serving meals. A groundskeeper who spent an unusual amount of time maintaining the landscaping around sensitive buildings. Even a clerk in the administrative offices who asked too many questions about personnel schedules and training exercises. Maria realized she was looking at a sophisticated intelligence operation, the kind of coordinated infiltration that required significant resources and planning. This was not some random terrorist group looking to make a statement. This was a professional operation with specific objectives, most likely connected to one of the many enemies that American Special Forces had made during their global operations. The breakthrough came when Maria overheard two of the fake contractors talking in Spanish near the equipment storage building. They were discussing timeline details, mentioning a specific date that was only 3 days away. They talked about eliminating the primary targets and sending a message that would be heard around the world. Most chilling of all, they mentioned explosives that had already been positioned throughout the base, hidden in locations that their intelligence gathering had identified as optimal for maximum damage. Maria's blood ran cold as she processed this information. In 3 days, these people planned to attack Coronado Naval Base with the specific goal of killing as many SEALs as possible. They had been preparing for months, placing explosives, gathering intelligence, and positioning themselves for a coordinated strike that would catch the base's security forces completely off guard. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment, staring at a box she had not opened in 5 years. Inside were her military medals, her marksmanship certificates, and photograph from her days as an elite soldier. Also in the box was something she had hoped never to need again: detailed technical manuals for advanced sniper rifles, including the Barrett M107.50 caliber rifle that she had used to eliminate high-value targets from distances that most people could not even imagine. Maria's children were now 24 years old. Isabella worked as a nurse at a San Diego hospital, and Diego was finishing his engineering degree at UC San Diego. They had grown up believing their mother was just a hard-working janitor who had immigrated to give them a better life. They had no idea that she had once been one of the most lethal snipers in South America, or that she was about to become their country's last line of defense against a terrorist attack. The next morning, Maria returned to work with a new sense of purpose. She continued her normal cleaning routine, but now every action was part of a larger plan. She used her access to map out the locations where she suspected explosives might be hidden. She identified potential sniper positions that would give her the best fields of fire if the attack proceeded as planned. Most importantly, she began preparing herself mentally for the possibility that she might have to kill again. The irony was not lost on her. For 5 years, she had been invisible to the very people she was now preparing to save. They had looked through her as if she did not exist, never imagining that the quiet woman who cleaned their offices had the skills and experience to protect them from threats they could not even see coming. Maria knew that she had less than 48 hours to prevent a massacre. She could not rely on the base's security forces because the attackers had clearly studied their procedures and planned around them. She could not warn the SEALs directly because they would never believe her. The only option was to prepare for the worst and hope that her 25-year-old training would be enough to save lives when the moment came. As she pushed her cleaning cart through the corridors of Coronado Naval Base, Maria began transforming back into the warrior she had once been. The janitor's uniform became camouflage, the cleaning supplies became tools for reconnaissance, and the invisible woman became a guardian angel that no one knew they needed. The attack was coming, but Maria Santos would be ready the second day of Maria's countdown began before sunrise. She arrived at the base 90 minutes early, using her custodial access card to enter through the maintenance entrance when security was at its lightest. The morning shift guards knew her routine and barely glanced up from their newspapers as she wheeled her cart through the checkpoint. Maria had spent the entire night studying the base layout in her mind, cross-referencing it with what she remembered from her Colombian military training about urban assault tactics. The fake contractors had been mapping the facility for weeks, which meant they had identified the most vulnerable points for both infiltration and explosive placement. Her job was to think like both the attackers and the defenders, anticipating their moves while preparing countermeasures. The first location she investigated was the power substation behind Building C, where she had seen 2 of the suspicious contractors spending an unusual amount of time the previous week. Using a small flashlight, Maria examined the electrical panels and conduit systems that fed power to the SEAL team facilities. What she found made her stomach clench with fear and anger. Attached to the main power feed was a device that definitely did not belong there. It was roughly the size of a smartphone, painted to match the electrical equipment, and connected to the primary power lines with professional-grade hardware. Maria recognized it immediately as a remotely detonated explosive charge, positioned to cut power to the entire SEAL complex at the moment of attack. Without electricity, the base's alarm systems, communications equipment, and automated security measures would be useless. She used her phone to photograph the device from multiple angles, being careful not to disturb anything that might trigger a premature detonation. The craftsmanship was professional, suggesting military or professional demolitions training. This was not the work of amateurs or fanatics with homemade bombs. Someone with serious expertise had planned and executed this infiltration. Moving carefully through the pre-dawn darkness, Maria continued her investigation. Behind the vehicle maintenance building, she discovered another explosive device attached to the underground fuel lines that supplied the base's generator systems. A third device was hidden in the storm drain near the communications building, positioned to flood the area with water and disable backup power systems. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of the attack plan. The terrorists intended to simultaneously cut primary power, backup power, and communications before launching their assault. The base's security forces would be operating blind and deaf, unable to coordinate a response or call for reinforcements. It was a sophisticated strategy that demonstrated intimate knowledge of the base's infrastructure and defensive capabilities. As the morning shift began arriving, Maria transitioned back into her role as an invisible janitor. She cleaned offices, emptied trash cans, and restocked supply closets while continuing to observe the movements of the suspicious contractors. They seemed more active today, checking and rechecking equipment with the nervous energy of people preparing for something big. Around mid-morning, Maria witnessed something that confirmed her timeline. Two of the fake contractors were standing near their van, speaking in hushed Spanish that they assumed no one could understand. They were discussing final preparations for tomorrow night, mentioning weapons that would be delivered that afternoon and specific positions that each team member would take during the assault. One of them, a tall man with graying hair who seemed to be the leader, was giving instructions about timing and coordination. He stressed the importance of eliminating the SEAL teams quickly and efficiently before the base's security forces could mount an effective response. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but Maria absorbed every detail, building a mental map of their operational plan. The weapons delivery happened exactly as she had overheard. Late that afternoon, a commercial catering truck arrived at the base's service entrance. Maria watched from a distance as the fake contractors helped unload what appeared to be normal food service supplies. But she noticed how carefully they handled certain containers, how they avoided the base security guards who were conducting a routine inspection of the truck's contents. The catering truck was legitimate, Maria realized. The infiltrators had either compromised the delivery company or had people working inside it. Either way, they now had weapons and equipment staged throughout the base, ready for tomorrow night's attack. The level of planning and preparation was staggering, suggesting months of intelligence gathering and recruitment. That evening, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She drove to a storage facility in downtown San Diego, a place she had not visited in over 5 years. Using a key she had kept on her keychain, but never expected to need again, she opened storage unit 247 and confronted her past. The unit contained everything she had saved from her military career in Colombia. Uniforms that no longer fit, medals that represented battles most people would never hear about, and training manuals written in Spanish that detailed advanced sniper tactics and urban warfare techniques. But most importantly, the unit contained something she had never expected to need again: her personal sniper rifle. The rifle was a Remington 700 .308 caliber, not as powerful as the military-grade weapon she had access to during her service, but deadly accurate in the right hands. Maria had purchased it legally after arriving in the United States, telling herself it was for sport shooting and home defense. The truth was that she could not imagine life without a precision rifle within reach, even if she hoped never to use it. She spent an hour cleaning and inspecting the weapon, checking the scope alignment, and function testing every component. The rifle had been properly stored and maintained, wrapped in protective oils, and sealed against moisture. As her hands moved through the familiar ritual of weapons maintenance, 25 years of civilian life seemed to fall away like old paint. Maria also retrieved other items from her military past: a ghillie suit for camouflage, range-finding equipment, and, most importantly, her sniper's logbook. The book contained detailed records of every shot she had taken during her military career, including wind conditions, range calculations, and target information. Reading through those pages brought back memories of battles fought in defense of innocent people, of confirmed kills that had saved the lives of fellow soldiers and civilians. The drive back to her apartment was surreal. Maria Santos, the janitor, was returning home with the tools of Maria Santos, the warrior, preparing to defend people who had never shown her any respect or recognition. The irony was bitter, but also strangely motivating. Tomorrow night, she would finally show them exactly who she was and what she was capable of. At home, Maria made another difficult decision. She called her children and asked them to visit friends outside the city for the weekend. Isabella was confused by the sudden request, but Maria insisted it was important. Diego was suspicious, asking pointed questions about his mother's unusual behavior, but eventually agreed to take his sister to Los Angeles for a couple of days. After her children left, Maria transformed her apartment into a tactical operations center. She spread detailed maps of the naval base across her dining room table, marking the locations where she had discovered explosive devices and noting the positions where she had observed suspicious activity. Using her military training, she began planning fields of fire, escape routes, and potential sniper positions. The base had several tall buildings that could provide elevated shooting positions, but most of them would be monitored by security cameras and patrol routes. Maria needed somewhere she could operate undetected while maintaining clear sight lines to the areas where the attack would most likely unfold. After studying the maps for hours, she identified the perfect location, the base's water tower. The water tower was positioned on a small hill overlooking the main SEAL facilities. It was outside the normal patrol routes and not covered by security cameras because it was considered non-critical infrastructure. Most importantly, it provided an elevated position with clear sight lines across the entire base, allowing Maria to engage targets at ranges where her marksmanship training would give her a decisive advantage. She spent the rest of the night calculating range cards for every possible shooting position, factoring in bullet drop, wind drift, and target movement. Using online weather forecasts, she predicted wind condition for the following evening and adjusted her calculations accordingly. By dawn, Maria had a complete tactical plan that would allow her to engage multiple targets from concealed positions. The final day began with Maria arriving at work as usual, but now every action was part of a larger strategy. She used her cleaning duties to conduct final reconnaissance, confirming the locations of the explosive devices and observing the behavior of the infiltrators. They were clearly nervous now, checking their watches frequently and avoiding normal conversation with legitimate base personnel. Around noon, Maria made her most important discovery yet. While cleaning the administrative offices, she overheard a phone conversation between one of the compromised staff members and someone speaking Spanish on the other end. The conversation revealed that the attack would begin at exactly 2,200 hours that night, coordinated with a power blackout that would disable the base's security systems. The assault team would consist of 12 men armed with automatic weapons and explosives. Their primary objective was to eliminate the members of SEAL Team 7's Alpha Platoon, who would be gathered in their barracks for a briefing about an upcoming training exercise. The secondary objective was to destroy as much equipment and infrastructure as possible before escaping in speedboats that would be waiting at the nearby marina. Maria spent the afternoon making final preparations while maintaining her normal work schedule. She positioned cleaning supplies and equipment in strategic locations that would allow her to move around the base without arousing suspicion. She also identified several potential escape routes and rally points, preparing for the possibility that her initial plan might not work perfectly. As her shift ended, Maria said goodbye to several base personnel with whom she had worked for 5 years. Lieutenant Commander Morrison nodded politely as he always did, completely unaware that the woman pushing the cleaning cart was the only thing standing between his team and a carefully planned massacre. Staff Sergeant Chin walked past without even glancing in her direction, focused on preparing for that evening's briefing. Maria felt a strange sadness as she realized these might be the last normal interactions she would ever have with these people. After tonight, everything would change. Either she would save their lives and reveal her true identity, or she would die trying and they would never know how close they had come to disaster. At 1800 hours, Maria left the base through the normal employee exit, but she did not go home. Instead, she drove to a predetermined location 3 miles away, where she had staged her equipment earlier that afternoon. In a secluded parking area behind a closed restaurant, she began the transformation from janitor to sniper. The process took nearly an hour. She applied camouflage paint to her face and hands, studying her reflection in the car's rearview mirror to ensure complete coverage. The ghillie suit went on over dark clothing, breaking up her human outline and making her nearly invisible in natural surroundings. The rifle received its own camouflage treatment, with tape and fabric strips that would prevent scope glare and muzzle flash. As darkness fell, Maria began her infiltration of Coronado Naval Base. She approached from the shoreline, using tide pools and rocky outcroppings for concealment as she moved toward the perimeter fence. Her route had been carefully planned to avoid security patrols and surveillance cameras, taking advantage of blind spots that most people would never notice. The fence itself presented no significant obstacle. Maria had identified a section near the water treatment plant where erosion had created a gap large enough for a person to crawl through. She was through the perimeter and onto the base grounds within minutes, moving like a ghost through familiar terrain that she had studied for 5 years. The climb to the water tower was the most dangerous part of the operation. Maria had to cross 200 meters of open ground where security patrols occasionally passed, carrying 40 pounds of equipment while remaining completely silent. She moved in short rushes, freezing whenever she heard footsteps or vehicle engines, using shadows and landscaping for concealment. By 21:30 hours, Maria was in position at the top of the water tower with a clear view of the entire base. Through her rifle scope, she could see the SEAL barracks where Alpha Platoon was gathering for their evening briefing. She could see the administrative buildings where the infiltrators had been positioning themselves throughout the day. Most importantly, she could see the locations of the explosive devices that would signal the beginning of the attack. The waiting was the hardest part. Maria lay motionless in her shooting position, controlling her breathing and heart rate while scanning for targets through her scope. She had done this many times before in Colombia, but never with so much at stake, and never while protecting people who had no idea they were in danger. At exactly 2,200 hours, the base lights went out as the first explosive charge detonated at the power substation. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, but the base was effectively blind and deaf as communication systems failed and alarm networks went dark. From her elevated position, Maria watched muzzle flashes appear at multiple locations as the assault team began their attack. The battle for Coronado Naval Base had begun, and Maria Santos was the only person who had seen it coming the moment the lights went out. Maria Santos became a different person entirely. The mild-mannered janitor who had spent 5 years invisibly cleaning floors disappeared, replaced by Sergeant Maria Elena Santos of Colombia's elite counterterrorism unit. Her breathing slowed to a steady rhythm. Her heart rate dropped to the controlled pace of a trained sniper, and her hands became rock-steady on the rifle that had once made her one of the most feared marksmen in South America. Through her rifle scope, Maria watched the attack unfold exactly as she had predicted. The assault team moved with military precision, emerging from concealed positions throughout the base with automatic weapons and explosive devices. They had infiltrated so thoroughly that they were attacking from inside the perimeter, making the base's outer defenses completely useless. The first target appeared in Maria's crosshairs within seconds of the power failure. A man in dark tactical gear was moving toward the SEAL barracks with what appeared to be a satchel charge, clearly intending to blow up the building while Alpha Platoon was inside for their briefing. He was approximately 300 meters away, moving at a steady pace that made him an ideal target for Maria's skill set. Maria adjusted for windage and elevation, accounting for the slight breeze coming off the ocean and the downward angle of her shot. Her finger found the trigger, and she controlled her breathing exactly as she had been trained 25 years earlier. The fundamentals of marksmanship never changed, regardless of how much time passed or how much a person's life situation evolved. The shot was perfect. The .308 bullet struck the bomber's center mass, dropping him instantly and sending his explosive device skittering across the concrete. One terrorist eliminated, 11 more to go. Maria worked the bolt action smoothly, chambering a fresh round while already scanning for her next target through the scope. The base's security forces were responding to the attack, but they were at a severe disadvantage. Without power for their communication systems, they could not coordinate their movements or call for backup. Emergency lighting provided only limited visibility, creating deep shadows where attackers could hide while approaching their objectives. Worst of all, the security personnel had no idea how many enemies they were facing or where the attacks were coming from. Maria's second target was a sniper who had taken position on the roof of the administration building, approximately 400 meters from the water tower. He was using a scoped rifle to engage base security personnel, creating a distraction while other members of his team moved toward their primary objectives. Maria could see his muzzle flashes clearly through her scope as he fired at guards who were trying to establish a defensive perimeter. This shot was more challenging due to the increased range and the fact that the target was using cover effectively. Maria waited patiently for him to expose himself, knowing that eventually he would have to present a clear target in order to engage his own objectives. The wait lasted nearly 2 minutes, during which time she heard gunfire erupting from multiple locations across the base. When the enemy sniper finally leaned out from behind an air conditioning unit to take another shot, Maria was ready. Her bullet crossed the 400 meters in less than half a second, striking the terrorist in the head and eliminating him before he could complete his shot. 2 down, 10 to go, and the remaining attackers still had no idea they were being hunted by a ghost from above. The third engagement came when Maria spotted 3 terrorists moving as a team toward the communications building. They were carrying demolition charges and moved with the coordination of experienced soldiers, covering each other's movements and communicating with hand signals. These were not amateur fanatics, but professional operators with serious military training. Maria's position on the water tower gave her a clear shot at all 3 targets, but she had to choose her engagement sequence carefully. Taking out the wrong target first could allow the others to escape or complete their mission. She identified the team leader by his central position and the way the other 2 deferred to his signals, making him the priority target. The team leader was approximately 250 meters away when Maria took her shot. The bullet struck him in the chest, and he dropped immediately. The other 2 terrorists reacted with trained reflexes, diving for cover behind a concrete barrier while scanning for the source of the shot. Their training was good, but they were looking in the wrong direction. Maria had already shifted her aim to the second target before the team leader hit the ground. The terrorist was crouched behind the concrete barrier, but part of his shoulder was still visible from her elevated position. It was not an ideal target, but Maria had made more difficult shots during her military career. The bullet took off the top of his shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him behind the barrier where he would no longer be a threat. The third terrorist panicked when his teammates were eliminated in rapid succession. Instead of maintaining cover and trying to identify Maria's position, he broke from concealment and ran toward the nearest building. It was exactly the wrong decision when facing a trained sniper. Maria tracked his movement through her scope and fired when he was halfway across the open ground, dropping him with a shot to the center of his back. 5 terrorists eliminated in less than 10 minutes, but Maria could hear that the battle was far from over. Gunfire continued to echo across the base as the remaining attackers engaged security personnel and pursued their objectives. She could see muzzle flashes from multiple locations, indicating that at least half the assault team was still operational and dangerous. The most critical situation was developing near the SEAL barracks, where Alpha Platoon was trapped inside the building by enemy fire. Maria could see at least 3 terrorists positioned around the building, preventing the SEALs from exiting while apparently preparing to assault the structure directly. This was exactly what the attack had been designed to accomplish: pin down the elite warriors and eliminate them in their own barracks. Lieutenant Commander Morrison and his team were not helpless, even trapped as they were. Through her scope, Maria could see the muzzle flashes as they returned fire from the building's windows, engaging the terrorists with whatever weapons they had available. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, facing attackers who had prepared for this exact scenario while the SEALs had been caught completely off guard. Maria shifted her position on the water tower to get better angles on the terrorists surrounding the barracks. One of them was using an abandoned vehicle for cover, firing an automatic rifle at the building while his teammates maneuvered for better positions. He was approximately 150 meters away, well within Maria's effective range, but the angle was difficult due to the way he was positioned behind the engine block. She waited for him to expose more of his body while reloading his weapon. When he shifted position to change magazines, Maria had a clear shot at his torso. The bullet struck him in the side, penetrating under his body armor and dropping him beside the vehicle. His automatic rifle clattered to the ground, reducing the volume of fire directed at the trapped SEALs. The sixth target was more cautious, using a drainage ditch for concealment while moving closer to the barracks. Maria could only see the top of his head occasionally as he low-crawled through the ditch, making him a very difficult target. She tracked his movement patiently, waiting for him to make a mistake that would give her a clear shot. The opportunity came when he reached the end of the ditch and had to cross a small open area to reach the building. As he rose to sprint across the gap, Maria was ready with her crosshairs centered on the space he would have to cross. The shot was almost instinctive, her muscle memory taking over as she fired at the precise moment the terrorist entered her sight picture. He collapsed in the middle of the open area, his own weapon spinning away across the concrete. The seventh terrorist was the most dangerous of all because he had successfully reached the side of the barracks and was preparing to place an explosive charge against the building's wall. If he succeeded, the blast would kill or wound most of Alpha Platoon, accomplishing the primary objective of the entire attack. Maria had only seconds to prevent a massacre of America's elite warriors. This shot required everything she had learned during 25 years of marksmanship training. The terrorist was pressed against the building's wall, presenting only a narrow target profile. The range was over 300 meters, and the angle was steep enough to affect bullet trajectory. Worst of all, he was moving as he worked with the explosive device, making it almost impossible to predict where he would be when the bullet arrived. Maria controlled her breathing and waited for the perfect moment. When the terrorist straightened up to arm the explosive device, she had a clear shot at his center mass. The bullet covered the distance in less than half a second, striking him in the chest and sending him stumbling away from the building. The explosive charge fell to the ground, armed but no longer positioned to damage the structure. 7 terrorists eliminated, but the remaining members of the assault team were adapting to the unexpected resistance they were facing. Maria could see them changing their tactics, using more cover, and moving more carefully as they realized that someone was picking them off with precision rifle fire. They still had not identified her position, but they were no longer acting like the attack was going according to plan. The base security forces were also beginning to organize a more effective response. Without their communication systems, they were operating in small groups, but their training was allowing them to coordinate through visual signals and predetermined procedures. Maria could see them establishing overlapping fields of fire and beginning to push back against the remaining attackers. From her position on the water tower, Maria spotted the 8th target trying to flank a group of security personnel who had taken cover behind a maintenance building. He was using a parallel drainage ditch to move undetected, planning to attack them from their blind side while they were focused on other threats. It was a sound tactical move that would have worked if Maria had not been watching from above. She tracked his movement through the scope, leading him slightly as he crawled through the ditch. When he raised his head to check his position relative to the security team, Maria fired. The shot was clean and final, dropping the terrorist in the drainage ditch where his body would not be found until after the battle was over. 8 down, 4 to go, but the remaining terrorists were becoming increasingly desperate. Maria could see them regrouping near the vehicle maintenance building, apparently preparing for one final assault on their primary objective. They had failed to eliminate Alpha Platoon in their barracks, but they might still accomplish their mission if they could coordinate one more attack. The ninth target made the mistake of exposing himself while trying to coordinate with his remaining teammates. He was using a portable radio, probably trying to contact their extraction team or call for reinforcements. Maria could see him clearly through her scope as he stood behind a concrete planter, speaking into the radio while gesturing toward the SEAL barracks. The shot was routine at this point, a simple center mass hit at 200 meters. The terrorist dropped beside the planter, his radio flying away to shatter against the concrete. His remaining teammates dove for cover, finally beginning to understand that they were being hunted by someone with exceptional marksmanship skills. The 10th target tried to be clever, using smoke grenades to conceal his movement as he attempted to reach a better position. But smoke that concealed him from ground level was less effective against Maria's elevated position. She could see his heat signature moving through the smoke cloud, tracked his progress, and fired when he emerged on the far side. Another clean hit, another terrorist eliminated. 2 attackers remained, and they were now in full retreat mode. Maria could see them abandoning their mission objectives and moving toward the base perimeter, apparently trying to reach their extraction point before they joined their dead teammates. They moved with the desperate speed of professionals who had suddenly found themselves on the wrong end of a very bad situation. But Maria was not finished with them. These people had come to her adopted home with the intention of murdering the men and women who served their country. They had planned to kill Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Staff Sergeant Shun, and the other members of Alpha Platoon who had never done anything worse than ignore the woman who cleaned their offices. For that, they would pay the ultimate price. The 11th terrorist made it almost to the perimeter fence before Maria's bullet caught up with him. He was running hard across open ground, probably thinking he had made it to safety when the .308 round struck him between the shoulder blades. He pitched forward and slid face first across the gravel, coming to rest just meters from the escape route that would have saved his life. The 12th and final terrorist was the smartest of them all. Instead of running in a straight line, he used every piece of cover available, moving from building to building in short rushes that made him a very difficult target. He was also the best trained, moving with the smooth efficiency of special forces rather than the more conventional tactics his teammates had displayed. Maria tracked him patiently as he worked his way toward the perimeter. She had time for careful shot placement because base security forces were now converging on the area, ensuring that even if this last terrorist escaped her rifle, he would not escape the base. But Maria had no intention of letting him get that far. When he made his final sprint toward the fence, Maria was ready. She had anticipated his route and was already tracking his movement when he broke from cover. The shot was perfect, striking him center mass and dropping him just 10 meters from the escape route that had been planned to carry the assault team to safety. 12 shots, 12 terrorists eliminated. The battle for Coronado Naval Base was over, and the good guys had won. From her position atop the water tower, Maria Santos had single-handedly neutralized an entire assault team that had spent months planning what should have been a devastating attack on America's elite warriors. But as the base's emergency lighting flickered back on and security teams began sweeping the area, Maria realized that her own battle was just beginning. She was a civilian janitor who had just killed 12 people with a sniper rifle. In a few minutes, base security would find her position and demand explanations that she was not sure she could provide. The invisible woman who had cleaned their floors for 5 years was about to become the most visible person on Coronado Naval Base as the emergency power systems gradually restored lighting across Coronado Naval Base. Maria Santos found herself facing a dilemma that no amount of military training had prepared her for. She had just eliminated an entire terrorist assault team, saving the lives of countless American servicemen and women. But she was also a civilian custodian who had somehow appeared on a military installation with a high-powered rifle and 12 confirmed kills. From her position atop the water tower, Maria could see security teams beginning to sweep the base in a coordinated search pattern. They would find the bodies of the terrorists within minutes, and shortly after that, they would begin looking for whoever had been responsible for such precise, long-range marksmanship. It would not take them long to realize that the shots had come from an elevated position, and the water tower was the most obvious location for a sniper's nest. Maria made a calculated decision. Rather than try to escape and inevitably be caught as a fugitive, she would remain in position and surrender to the first security team that found her. But first, she needed to secure her rifle and prepare herself for what was going to be a very difficult conversation with some very confused and suspicious military personnel. She carefully unloaded the rifle, engaging the safety and placing the weapon where it would be clearly visible to anyone approaching her position. The ghillie suit came off next, revealing the simple dark clothing underneath that would identify her as a civilian rather than a military operator. Most importantly, she retrieved her Colombian military identification from the equipment pack, along with documentation that would help explain who she was and what qualifications had enabled her to accomplish what she had just done. The documents were over 20 years old, written in Spanish, and bore the official seals of Colombia's National Army. They identified Sergeant Maria Elena Santos as a qualified sniper instructor with over 40 confirmed kills in anti-terrorism operations. The papers also included commendations for marksmanship, tactical excellence, and valor in combat that painted a picture of an elite soldier rather than the invisible janitor that everyone on the base had assumed her to be. As Maria organized her equipment and prepared for surrender, she could hear radio chatter from the security teams below. Their voices carried clearly in the night air as they called out positions and coordinated their search patterns. She understood every word of their tactical communications, recognizing the procedures and terminology from her own military background, but she knew that her ability to understand their operations would only add to their confusion about her identity. The first security team reached the base of the water tower approximately 15 minutes after the last shot had been fired. Maria could hear their boots on the metal ladder rungs as they climbed toward her position, moving with the careful precision of professionals who had no idea what they might find at the top. She remained motionless with her hands clearly visible, waiting for them to reach the platform where she had conducted her one-woman war against the terrorist assault team. Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez was the first person to see Maria in her true environment. He emerged from the ladder shaft with his rifle at the ready, expecting to find either an enemy sniper or an empty position. Instead, he found a middle-aged Hispanic woman sitting calmly beside a civilian hunting rifle, surrounded by spent brass casings and military equipment that seemed completely inconsistent with her appearance. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them and identify yourself," Rodriguez commanded, his training taking over despite his obvious confusion about the situation. Behind him, 3 more security personnel emerged onto the platform, each of them clearly struggling to understand how a woman who looked like someone's grandmother had ended up in a sniper position with evidence of multiple confirmed kills scattered around her. Maria complied with the sergeant's instructions, keeping her hands visible while speaking in clear English with only the slightest trace of her Colombian accent. "My name is Maria Elena Santos. I am employed as a custodial worker on this base, and I have just neutralized a terrorist assault team that was attempting to eliminate members of SEAL Team 7. I am unarmed and prepared to surrender to your custody." The security team exchanged glances that communicated their complete bewilderment with the situation they had stumbled into. They had responded to reports of sniper fire and multiple enemy casualties, expecting to find either a military operation in progress or evidence of foreign infiltration. Instead, they had found the woman who cleaned their offices sitting beside a hunting rifle and calmly claiming responsibility for eliminating an entire assault team. Sergeant Rodriguez made the decision to secure the scene and call for senior personnel rather than try to sort out the situation himself. Within minutes, the water tower was surrounded by military police, base security officers, and senior personnel who had been awakened by reports that Coronado Naval Base was under attack. The radio chatter was constant as different units tried to piece together exactly what had happened and who was responsible for saving the base from what appeared to have been a highly sophisticated terrorist operation. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison arrived on scene just as Maria was being escorted down from the water tower. He had led Alpha Platoon's defense of their barracks during the attack, trading gunfire with terrorists while having no idea that someone was systematically eliminating the assault team from above. When he saw Maria in custody, his first reaction was complete confusion, followed by a growing suspicion that something extraordinary had just occurred. "Wait a minute," Morrison said, studying Maria's face in the emergency lighting. "I know you. You're the janitor who cleans our offices. What the hell are you doing up there with a rifle?" His question was directed at the security team, but his eyes remained fixed on Maria as he tried to reconcile the quiet custodian he had occasionally nodded to in the hallways with the woman who had apparently just saved his life and the lives of his entire platoon. Maria looked directly at Morrison, seeing him clearly for the first time as a person rather than just another face that looked through her while she cleaned around his workspace. "Lieutenant Commander, my name is Maria Santos, and for the past 5 years, I have been responsible for maintaining the cleanliness of your facilities. Before that, I was Sergeant Maria Elena Santos of Colombia's National Army, qualified as a sniper instructor and anti-terrorism specialist. Tonight, I used those skills to prevent the murder of you and your men." The statement hit Morrison like a physical blow. He stared at Maria for several long seconds, processing information that completely changed his understanding of someone he had seen nearly every day for years. The quiet woman who had been virtually invisible to him and his team had been a trained killer all along, watching them and protecting them without their knowledge. Base Commander Captain William Hayes arrived on scene within the hour, along with representatives from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and intelligence personnel who would need to debrief Maria about everything she had observed and experienced. By this time, the bodies of the 12 terrorists had been secured, and their equipment was being analyzed by explosive ordnance disposal teams who were working to disarm the devices that had been planted throughout the base. The initial forensic evidence was overwhelming. 12 terrorists, 12 bullet wounds from a .308 caliber rifle, each shot placed with precision that indicated exceptional marksmanship training. The spacing of the shots and the timing of the engagement suggested that a single shooter had eliminated the entire assault team in less than 30 minutes, operating from an elevated position that provided overwatch of the entire base. Maria was moved to a secure debriefing room where she spent the next 6 hours providing a detailed account of everything she had observed, suspected, and done in response to the terrorist threat. She showed the investigators her Colombian military documentation, explained her background and training, and walked them through the intelligence gathering process that had allowed her to identify and track the infiltrators over the course of several weeks. The investigators were skeptical at first, but as Maria provided increasingly specific details about the terrorist operation, their attitudes began to shift from suspicion to amazement. She described the locations of explosive devices that had not yet been found, identified additional base personnel who had been compromised by the infiltrators, and provided tactical analysis of the assault plan that demonstrated intimate knowledge of both the attackers' capabilities and the base's defensive vulnerabilities. Dr. Sarah Chun, a naval intelligence analyst who specialized in South American military organizations, was brought in to verify Maria's background and credentials. Using secure communication systems, she contacted her counterparts in Colombian intelligence and confirmed that Sergeant Maria Elena Santos had indeed been one of their most effective counterterrorism operatives before immigrating to the United States in 2000. The Colombian records painted a picture of an exceptional soldier who had participated in numerous classified operations against drug cartels and terrorist organizations. Her confirmed kill count during active duty was 43, including several high-value targets who had been eliminated at ranges exceeding 800 meters. She had received multiple commendations for tactical excellence and had trained other snipers before leaving military service to immigrate with her children. As dawn broke over Coronado Naval Base, Maria found herself in a conference room surrounded by senior military officers, intelligence analysts, and federal agents who were still struggling to process what had occurred. Base Commander Hayes opened the formal debriefing session by acknowledging something that would have been unthinkable 12 hours earlier. "Mrs. Santos," Hayes began, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and bewilderment. "It appears that you single-handedly prevented what could have been the worst terrorist attack on a U.S. military installation in decades. Your actions saved the lives of multiple personnel and prevented significant damage to critical facilities. On behalf of Coronado Naval Base and the United States Navy, I want to express our gratitude for your service and sacrifice." The formal recognition was gratifying, but Maria was more concerned about practical matters. She had killed 12 people, regardless of the circumstances, and she needed to know whether she would be facing criminal charges for her actions. She also needed to know whether her immigration status would be affected by her decision to use military skills that she had never disclosed during the naturalization process. Federal Agent Jennifer Walsh, representing the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, addressed Maria's legal concerns directly. "Mrs. Santos, based on our preliminary investigation, your actions appear to have been completely justified under federal self-defense and defense of others statutes. You are protecting American military personnel from a clear and present danger, using reasonable force to prevent mass casualties. We do not anticipate any criminal charges related to last night's incident." The immigration concerns were handled by Department of Homeland Security Attorney Michael Foster, who had reviewed Maria's naturalization paperwork and consulted with his superiors about the unique circumstances. "Mrs. Santos, your failure to fully disclose your military background during the immigration process is understandable given the dangerous situation you were fleeing in Colombia. Under the circumstances, and given your exemplary conduct as a naturalized citizen, we see no reason to question your legal status." But the most significant revelation came when Colonel Patricia Williams from U.S. Special Operations Command entered the debriefing room, carrying a classified folder that would change everything Maria thought she knew about her life in America. Colonel Williams had spent the night making secure phone calls to Washington and reviewing classified databases that contained information about foreign military personnel who had provided assistance to American operations. "Mrs. Santos," Colonel Williams said, taking a seat directly across from Maria, "we've been looking into your background more thoroughly, and we've discovered something that you may not be aware of. During your service with Colombia National Army, you participated in several joint operations with U.S. Special Forces units. Your sniper support was directly responsible for saving the lives of American servicemen during counter-narcotics operations in the late 1990s. The colonel opened her folder and spread several photographs across the table. They showed a younger Maria in Colombian military uniform, working alongside American Green Berets and Delta Force operators during classified missions that had never been publicly acknowledged. In one photograph, she was receiving a commendation from a U.S. Army colonel for exceptional marksmanship during a hostage rescue operation that had freed 3 American DEA agents from cartel captivity. Maria stared at the photographs with growing amazement. She remembered the operations clearly, but had never known the identities or fates of the American personnel she had worked with. The joint missions had been highly classified, and after completing them, she had simply returned to her regular duties with Colombian forces. "Mrs. Santos," Colonel Williams continued, "what you did last night was not the first time you've saved American lives. You've been protecting our people for over 25 years, first in Colombia and now here at home. That makes you something very special in our book." The revelation recontextualized everything about Maria's situation. She was not just a civilian who had happened to have military training. She was a proven ally who had a documented history of putting her life at risk to protect American service members. The quiet janitor who had been invisible for 5 years had actually been a guardian angel watching over people who had no idea how much they owed her. As the debriefing session concluded, Maria was faced with choices that would determine the rest of her life. The military was offering her opportunities that she had never imagined possible. Consulting positions, training roles, and even the possibility of working directly with special operations units that needed her unique combination of skills and experience. But first, she had to face the most difficult conversation of all. In a few hours, Lieutenant Commander Morrison and the members of Alpha Platoon would want to meet the woman who had saved their lives. They would want to thank her, to understand her story, and to try to reconcile the invisible custodian they had ignored with the elite warrior who had protected them. For Maria Santos, the hardest part was not the fighting or the killing or the government debriefings. The hardest part was preparing to look into the eyes of people who had never seen her as anything more than part of the furniture, and helping them understand that sometimes the most powerful guardians are the ones you never notic 3 days after the attack on Coronado Naval Base. Maria Santos found herself in a situation that felt more surreal than anything she had experienced during her military career. She was sitting in the base commander's conference room, wearing a simple black dress instead of her custodial uniform, waiting to meet formally with the men whose lives she had saved. The same conference room where she had once emptied trash cans and dusted furniture was now the site of her transformation from invisible worker to recognized hero. The media attention had been overwhelming. News outlets around the world were covering the story of the janitor who had single-handedly defeated a terrorist assault team. But base security had managed to keep Maria's identity and location confidential while the various investigations continued. She appreciated the privacy, but she also understood that her quiet life was over forever. Lieutenant Commander Morrison entered the room first, followed by the 11 other members of Alpha Platoon. They moved with the confident bearing of elite warriors, but Maria could see uncertainty in their eyes as they tried to reconcile the woman sitting before them with the person they thought they had known for 5 years. Each of them had interacted with her in small ways over the years, but none of them had ever really seen her as a person. Staff Sergeant Tommy Chun looked particularly uncomfortable as he took his seat. Maria remembered him as someone who had always been polite but distant, occasionally nodding in her direction, but never engaging in actual conversation. Now he was studying her face as if trying to find clues about the person who had been hiding in plain sight for so long. Mrs. Santos, Morrison began, his voice carrying a formality that had never existed during their previous brief encounters. I want to start by saying that every person in this room owes you their life. Without your intervention, we would all be dead, and the terrorists would have accomplished their mission. We are here to express our gratitude and to ask for your forgiveness. The request for forgiveness caught Maria off guard. She had expected thanks, questions, and probably some awkwardness as they tried to adjust to her new identity. But she had not anticipated that these elite warriors would feel the need to apologize to her. Forgiveness for what, Lieutenant Commander? Maria asked, genuinely confused by the direction of the conversation. For 5 years, we walked past you every day without really seeing you, Morrison replied, his voice heavy with something that sounded like shame. We treated you like part of the background, never bothering to learn your name or understand your story. While we were ignoring you, you were watching over us, protecting us from threats we couldn't even see coming. We failed you as human beings, and we're sorry. The apology was echoed around the room as other members of the platoon added their own words of regret and gratitude. Petty Officer Marcus Williams spoke about how he had always assumed Maria did not speak English well, never realizing that she understood every conversation that took place in the area she cleaned. Hospital corpsman David Kumar admitted that he had never even considered that the quiet custodian might have her own story, her own background, or her own remarkable skills. Maria listened to their words with a mixture of emotions she could not easily define. Part of her was gratified to finally receive recognition and respect from people whose opinions mattered to her more than she had realized. But another part of her felt sad about the years of isolation that could have been avoided if they had simply bothered to see her as a person. Gentlemen, Maria said when they had finished speaking, You have nothing to apologize for. You treated me exactly the way most people treat service workers, and I understood that from the beginning. I chose to remain invisible because it served my purposes and protected my family. If you had known who I really was, it might have compromised my ability to observe and protect you. Seaman James Mitchell, the youngest member of the platoon, raised his hand tentatively before speaking. Mrs. Santos, can I ask you something? How did you know the attack was coming? How long were you watching those guys before you figured out what they were planning? Maria smiled at the young sailor's curiosity, remembering her own eagerness to learn from more experienced soldiers when she was his age. I started noticing unusual activity about 3 weeks ago. Men who claimed to be contractors but moved wrong, asked the wrong questions, and had hands that were too soft for manual labor. I spent my military career learning to identify threats, and once you develop that skill, it never goes away. The questions continued for over an hour as the SEAL team members tried to understand how Maria had managed to gather intelligence, plan her response, and execute such a precise operation without any support or official sanction. They were particularly interested in her tactical decision-making process and her ability to maintain accurate fire while engaging multiple targets across different ranges and angles. The technical aspects were actually the easy part, Maria explained. Marksmanship is like riding a bicycle. Once you learn it properly, you never really forget. The difficult part was emotional. These were people I had been observing for weeks, learning their patterns and routines. When the moment came to pull the trigger, I had to overcome years of civilian conditioning that told me killing was wrong, regardless of the circumstances. Staff Sergeant Chun asked about her transition from military life to civilian employment and how she had managed to hide such an extraordinary background for so long. Maria's answer revealed a story of sacrifice and determination that impressed the SEALs even more than her marksmanship skills. When I came to America with my children, I made a conscious decision to leave my military identity in Colombia, Maria explained. I wanted Isabella and Diego to grow up as normal American kids, without the burden of knowing their mother had killed people. I thought I could build a completely new life and never need those skills again. Last week proved me wrong. The conversation shifted to Maria's current situation and the choices she was facing about her future. Colonel Williams had briefed the SEAL team about the various opportunities being offered to Maria, including positions with special operations units that could use her unique combination of skills and experience. But Maria had not yet decided whether she wanted to return to military life or continue as a civilian. Morrison leaned forward in his chair, choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Santos, I hope you'll consider working with us in some capacity. What you did last week was incredible, but it also showed us how much we don't know about the threats we face every day. We could use someone with your skills and perspective to help us see what we're missing. The offer was tempting, but Maria had concerns that went beyond her own preferences. Her children still did not know the full truth about her background or what had happened at the base. She had told them only that there had been a security incident at work and that she had helped security personnel identify some suspicious individuals. They had no idea that their mother had killed 12 people or that she was being offered positions that would put her back in harm's way. I appreciate the offer, Lieutenant Commander, but I need to consider my family obligations before making any decisions about my future, Maria replied. My children have lived their entire lives thinking I was just a custodian. This situation has forced me to reveal parts of my past that I hoped they would never need to know about. Petty Officer O'Sullivan, who had been quiet throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke up. Mrs. Santos, I know we don't have a right to ask for anything more from you, but I hope you'll think about this. There are probably other people out there who need the kind of protection you provided for us. You have skills that could save lives and prevent attacks that other people would never see coming. The weight of that responsibility was something Maria had been considering since the moment she fired her first shot from the water tower. She had spent 5 years trying to live a normal civilian life, but the attack had proven that she could not simply turn off her training and instincts. She was a warrior, and warriors had obligations that went beyond their own personal comfort and safety. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises to stay in contact, but Maria could see that the relationships had fundamentally changed. These men would never again be able to look at her as just a custodian, and she would never again be able to blend into the background as she had for the past 5 years. The invisible woman had become permanently visible, for better or worse. 2 weeks later, Maria made her decision. She accepted a position as a special consultant with Naval Special Warfare Command, working with various SEAL teams to develop threat assessment protocols and provide training in counter-surveillance techniques. It was not a return to active military duty, but it was a way to use her skills in service of the country that had given her and her children refuge and opportunity. The new position came with a significant increase in salary, security clearance, and recognition that Maria had never expected to receive. But perhaps more importantly, it gave her a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life since leaving Colombia. She was no longer hiding her identity or pretending to be someone she was not. Her children took the news better than she had expected. Isabella was proud of her mother's heroism and interested in learning more about the military career that had shaped the woman who raised her. Diego was fascinated by the technical aspects of his mother's marksmanship skills and asked detailed questions about ballistics and tactical planning that demonstrated the analytical mind that had made him successful in engineering school. 6 months after the attack, Maria found herself back at Coronado Naval Base, but now she arrived through the main gate with her own security credentials instead of sneaking through employee entrances with a cleaning cart. She worked in an office with her name on the door, consulted with senior officers about operational security, and trained some of the most elite warriors in the world. The irony was not lost on her. For 5 years, she had been invisible to the very people she now worked with as an equal. They had looked through her when she was mopping their floors, but now they sought her opinions on matters of life and death. The transformation was complete, but Maria never forgot the lessons she had learned during her years of invisibility. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who had since been promoted to commander and given command of his own SEAL team, often worked with Maria on threat assessment projects. Their professional relationship had evolved into genuine mutual respect and friendship, built on shared experiences and an understanding of what it meant to put service above personal comfort. You know, Morrison said during one of their planning sessions, "I still can't believe we worked in the same building for 5 years without ever really talking. I keep wondering what other remarkable people we walk past every day without noticing." Maria smiled at his observation, remembering her own feelings of invisibility and the assumptions people made based on her job title and appearance. "Commander, the world is full of people with extraordinary stories and abilities who are hiding in plain sight. Sometimes they're hiding by choice, sometimes by circumstance, but they're always there. The trick is learning to see them." The lesson had applications far beyond military operations. Maria began speaking at leadership conferences and military academies about the importance of recognizing talent and potential in unexpected places. Her story became a case study in how assumptions and stereotypes could blind people to the resources and capabilities that surrounded them every day. But perhaps the most important change was personal. For the first time in 25 years, Maria Santos was living as her complete self. She was no longer hiding her military background, suppressing her tactical instincts, or pretending to be less capable than she actually was. She was a warrior, a mother, an immigrant, and an American hero, all at the same time. The base cafeteria where she now ate lunch as a respected consultant was the same place where she had once cleaned tables and emptied trash cans. Sometimes she would look at the current custodial staff and wonder what stories they carried, what skills they possessed, and what remarkable things they might be capable of if given the opportunity to show their true potential. Maria's transformation from invisible janitor to recognized guardian had taken just one night, but the ripple effects would continue for years to come. She had proven that heroism could come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful protectors were the ones no one bothered to notice. The SEAL she had saved now understood that strength and capability could be found in any uniform, any job title, and any background. They had learned to see the people around them more clearly, to recognize that the quiet worker in the corner might have the skills to save their lives when everything went wrong. For Maria Santos, the woman who had once laughed at by those who underestimated her, the last laugh was the sweetest of all. She had proven that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all, and that the most effective warriors were often the ones who chose to remain invisible until the moment they were needed most. The base continued its mission of training America's elite warriors, but now there was a new understanding that extraordinary people could be found in extraordinary places. And somewhere in the background, other invisible guardians continued their quiet watch, ready to step forward when their moment came to protect the people who had never bothered to learn their names. The story of Maria Santos became legend within the special operations community, a reminder that heroism takes many forms, and that the most important battles are sometimes fought by the people no one expects to fight them. She had earned her place among America's defenders not through recognition or rank, but through action when action was needed most. And in the end, that was the only recognition that truly mattered. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the sterile hallway of Coronado Naval Base, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. At 52, she had been invisible to most people for the better part of 20 years. The Navy SEALs who passed by barely glanced at the short, stocky woman in the faded blue uniform. To them, she was just another face in the background, someone who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. But Maria had secrets that would shock every person on that base. 25 years ago, she had been Sergeant Maria Elena Santos of the Colombian National Army's elite counterterrorism unit. She had trained with the best snipers in South America, earned medals for marksmanship that gathered dust in a box under her bed, and fought battles that never made it into any history books. Those days felt like another lifetime now, buried beneath years of cleaning supplies and minimum wage paychecks. The transformation began when her husband Carlos was killed during a drug cartel raid in Medellin. Maria was 6 months pregnant at the time, carrying twins who would never meet their father. The grief nearly destroyed her, but it also opened her eyes to a harsh reality. Colombia was becoming too dangerous for her unborn children. She needed to get them somewhere safe, somewhere they could grow up without the constant threat of violence. Using her military connections, Maria applied for asylum in the United States. The process took 3 years of paperwork, interviews, and waiting. During that time, she gave birth to Isabella and Diego, raised them as a single mother, and watched the country she loved tear itself apart. When the approval finally came through, she packed everything that mattered into 2 suitcases and bought 3 one-way tickets to San Diego. Starting over in America proved harder than any military operation she had ever completed. Her Colombian military training meant nothing to American employers. Her English was broken and heavily accented. Her college degree in tactical operations was not recognized by any U.S. institution. She was a highly trained warrior reduced to cleaning office buildings and restaurants just to keep her children fed. The job at Coronado came through a temp agency 5 years ago. The pay was decent, the hours were steady, and most importantly, it came with health insurance for her and the twins. Maria took pride in her work, even if others looked down on it. She scrubbed floors with the same precision she once used to clean her sniper rifle. She organized supply closets with the tactical efficiency she once applied to mission planning. What the SEALs did not know was that Maria understood every word of their conversations. She had spent 3 years learning English by watching American movies and reading military manuals. Her accent made people assume she was ignorant, and she had learned to use that assumption to her advantage. While cleaning around their briefing rooms, she absorbed information about their training exercises, their equipment, and their operational procedures. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was one of the few who ever bothered to acknowledge her existence. He would nod politely when their paths crossed, and sometimes even say good morning in his limited Spanish. Maria appreciated the gesture, even though she spoke English better than he probably realized. Morrison commanded SEAL Team 7's Alpha Platoon, a group of 12 elite warriors who had seen action in Afghanistan, Iraq, and various classified locations around the globe. The platoon included Staff Sergeant Tommy Chun, a demolitions expert from San Francisco whose parents had immigrated from Taiwan. There was Petty Officer First Class Marcus Williams, a communications specialist from Detroit who could hack into enemy radio frequencies faster than most people could send a text message. Hospital Corpsman Second Class David Kumar served as their medic, a soft-spoken man from Chicago whose steady hands had saved more lives than he could count. Petty Officer Second Class Ryan O'Sullivan handled their heavy weapons, a redhead from Boston whose Irish temper was matched only by his loyalty to his teammates. Petty Officer Third Class Alex Rodriguez managed their reconnaissance equipment, using drones and surveillance gear to gather intelligence before operations. The youngest member was Seaman James Mitchell, just 22 years old and eager to prove himself worthy of the SEAL trident he wore with such pride. These men represented the best of American military training, each one capable of operating in any environment on Earth. They could survive in Arctic conditions, navigate through dense jungles, and execute precision strikes in urban warfare scenarios. What they could not do was see the threat that was slowly building around their own base. Maria noticed the changes first because she was always watching, always listening. Strange maintenance workers appeared on the base, men who spoke with accents she recognized from her days fighting cartels in Colombia. They claimed to be contractors hired to upgrade the electrical systems, but Maria saw how they moved, how they positioned themselves, how they seemed more interested in mapping the base layout than actually fixing anything. The real contractors had been there the week before, legitimate electricians who completed their work efficiently and left. These new men were something else entirely. They carried tools, but Maria noticed that their hands were not calloused like those of real workers. Their uniforms were too clean, their movements too calculated. Most telling of all, they spoke to each other in rapid Spanish when they thought no one was listening, discussing things that had nothing to do with electrical work. Maria's military training kicked in as she observed their behavior patterns. They spent too much time near the SEAL team buildings, taking photographs of entrances and exit points while pretending to check junction boxes. They asked casual questions about security procedures, shift changes, and personnel movements. When the base's actual security team walked by, these men became nervous, fumbling with their equipment and avoiding eye contact. The pieces of a puzzle began forming in Maria's mind, a picture that filled her with growing dread. Someone was planning an attack on the base, specifically targeting the SEAL teams. The fake contractors were gathering intelligence, mapping out the facility, and identifying the best ways to infiltrate and strike. Maria had seen this pattern before in Colombia, where cartels would spend weeks studying military installations before launching coordinated assaults. She considered reporting her suspicions to base security, but knew how that conversation would go. A janitor with broken English claiming that maintenance workers were actually terrorists? They would think she was crazy, paranoid, or trying to cause trouble. Even if they listened politely, they would probably assume she was mistaken about what she had seen and heard. Maria decided to conduct her own surveillance operation instead. She used her access to different areas of the base to track the movements of the suspicious contractors. She memorized their faces, noted their vehicles, and documented their behavior patterns. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears and added details that made the threat even more serious than she had initially thought. The fake contractors were not working alone. They had accomplices among the base's support staff, people who had been slowly infiltrating Coronado over the past several months. A new food service worker who seemed more interested in the dining hall's proximity to the SEAL barracks than in actually serving meals. A groundskeeper who spent an unusual amount of time maintaining the landscaping around sensitive buildings. Even a clerk in the administrative offices who asked too many questions about personnel schedules and training exercises. Maria realized she was looking at a sophisticated intelligence operation, the kind of coordinated infiltration that required significant resources and planning. This was not some random terrorist group looking to make a statement. This was a professional operation with specific objectives, most likely connected to one of the many enemies that American Special Forces had made during their global operations. The breakthrough came when Maria overheard two of the fake contractors talking in Spanish near the equipment storage building. They were discussing timeline details, mentioning a specific date that was only 3 days away. They talked about eliminating the primary targets and sending a message that would be heard around the world. Most chilling of all, they mentioned explosives that had already been positioned throughout the base, hidden in locations that their intelligence gathering had identified as optimal for maximum damage. Maria's blood ran cold as she processed this information. In 3 days, these people planned to attack Coronado Naval Base with the specific goal of killing as many SEALs as possible. They had been preparing for months, placing explosives, gathering intelligence, and positioning themselves for a coordinated strike that would catch the base's security forces completely off guard. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment, staring at a box she had not opened in 5 years. Inside were her military medals, her marksmanship certificates, and photographs from her days as an elite soldier. Also in the box was something she had hoped never to need again: detailed technical manuals for advanced sniper rifles, including the Barrett M107.50 caliber rifle that she had used to eliminate high-value targets from distances that most people could not even imagine. Maria's children were now 24 years old. Isabella worked as a nurse at a San Diego hospital, and Diego was finishing his engineering degree at UC San Diego. They had grown up believing their mother was just a hard-working janitor who had immigrated to give them a better life. They had no idea that she had once been one of the most lethal snipers in South America, or that she was about to become their country's last line of defense against a terrorist attack. The next morning, Maria returned to work with a new sense of purpose. She continued her normal cleaning routine, but now every action was part of a larger plan. She used her access to map out the locations where she suspected explosives might be hidden. She identified potential sniper positions that would give her the best fields of fire if the attack proceeded as planned. Most importantly, she began preparing herself mentally for the possibility that she might have to kill again. The irony was not lost on her. For 5 years, she had been invisible to the very people she was now preparing to save. They had looked through her as if she did not exist, never imagining that the quiet woman who cleaned their offices had the skills and experience to protect them from threats they could not even see coming. Maria knew that she had less than 48 hours to prevent a massacre. She could not rely on the base's security forces because the attackers had clearly studied their procedures and planned around them. She could not warn the SEALs directly because they would never believe her. The only option was to prepare for the worst and hope that her 25-year-old training would be enough to save lives when a moment came. As she pushed her cleaning cart through the corridors of Coronado Naval Base, Maria began transforming back into the warrior she had once been. The janitor's uniform became camouflage, the cleaning supplies became tools for reconnaissance, and the invisible woman became a guardian angel that no one knew they needed. The attack was coming, but Maria Santos would be ready.